on The Indian Doctor.
You've come all the way from India? Yes.
Prem and Kamini Sharma have just arrived in Wales.
Welcome to your new home.
And if their new town isn't sure about them,
You have to watch those people.
the feeling is mutual.
They're peasants, Prem.
The award-winning series.
Need a good drama to dig into? Let us introduce The Indian Doctor. All 3 seasons are now available here in Colorado only on PBS 12. Go to pbs12.org/passport to binge.
Welcome to the July 30th, 2021 edition of Colorado Inside Out. I'm your host, Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you so much for joining us. We start today with the story just released. Former Colorado Governor and presidential candidate Richard Lamm passed away at the age of 85 on Thursday evening. Governor Lamm rose to statewide influence with his opposition to the Winter Olympics coming to Colorado in the early 70s and leading the effort for voters to turn down the event, the first time that would happen around the world. Lamm was the first 3-term governor in Colorado, serving from 1975 to 1987, and he was known for being unafraid of controversial opinions ranging from health care to immigration and many in between. Governor Lamm was also a good friend of PBS 12 and this program. He hosted debates and election coverage for us in 2000 and is featured in our extended cut of our 1973 Colorado Inside Out Time Machine special, in addition to being a key ally in our 11th Hour series. Patty Calhoun from Westward, we start with you. Richard Lamm left a very interesting Colorado legacy. Your thoughts?
And even before I moved to Colorado, what I really knew about Colorado was just how independent it was, and that was based on the whole campaign to turn down the Olympics. That was unbelievable back in the 70s, that you would fight the power structure, you would fight all the good old boys, and you would do what you thought was right for the environment, for the economy, and then you would make your way into the governor's office because of it. So he was governor when we started Westward. I learned a lot more about him afterwards. For example, very few people seem to know that Colorado was the first state to legalize choice, and that was in '67, largely because of Dick Lamm's work in the legislature. He always spoke his mind. He was not concerned about taking on unpopular opinions. He also would talk to you about his unpopular opinions. You may recall the whole duty to die controversy back in the 80s when he even made Playboy magazine. And I spoke to him several times over the last year thinking about this duty to die issue, which is really when you're talking about scarce medical resources, who deserves them? And we had some very interesting, frank discussions about when older people are demanding a lot of the resources during, say, COVID, what happens? Who gets the resources? And should the older people take them? He had a very, very adult, let's say, approach to death. And we will be talking a lot about all his opinions and the fact that he really represented this state so well over the next few weeks.
You think about the idea of an honest statesman, which I think sometimes nowadays people might think is an oxymoron, but someone actually willing to say, here's what I think, even if it's unpopular. And then also saying, here's a point in my past when I was wrong. Richard Lamm had that kind of confidence. We go now to our next guest via Skype. We're so happy to have him. Eric Sonderman joins us. He's a columnist with Denver Gazette and, of course, Colorado Politics. And for those of you who may not know, Eric Sonderman began his illustrious career as part of Governor Richard Lamm's very first administration as part of his group. And, Eric, we're counting on your experience with Governor Lamm to probably add a great deal of verisimilitude to your comments about Richard Lamm. So we'll throw it to you.
Well done, Dominic, on that question. Well done, Patty, with your response. It's been a tough 24 hours since I got the word yesterday of what was in store, and then word last night that Dick Lamm had indeed passed away. What a man, what a life. Me, it's been a lifetime almost. I think I was 18 or 19 when I first met Dick, when I worked on his very first campaign. A very young and raw field coordinator in Southern Colorado. Long before John McCain sort of coined the term straight talk and straight talk express, we had straight talk in Colorado from Dick Lamm. That was his brand. That is who he was at his core. He was forthright. He was deeply engaged with life. The word I've been using today in thinking about his life is one of exertion. He exerted himself physically. He exerted himself as governor. He exerted himself as a husband and father in these latter years, as a loving and doting grandparent. He exerted himself intellectually. He was always up for an intellectual challenge. He thought it was an attribute to sometimes change your mind. Too often these days, for a politician to change their mind, even with new information or changing conditions, is to quote flip-flop. Dick clearly had this attitude that if you have the same opinion when you're 40 as you did when you're 20, and then at age 60 as you did when you're 40, you're not really thinking, and you're certainly not rethinking. I obviously could go on. He was a formative influence in my life. He was a formidable leader for the state of Colorado. The last thought I'll leave you with, Dominic, on my mentor, is that toward the end of his governorship, his poll numbers were almost flat, constant between his support among Democrats and Republicans and unaffiliated. Try to imagine that in this day and age, in this polarized day and age. Try to imagine a prominent Democratic or Republican elected official having almost as much popularity in the opposite party as they do in their own, and that was Dick Lamm.
Also joining us from the table here, Michael Fields, Executive Director with Colorado Rising State Action. Michael, admittedly, much of Governor Lamm's career is a little before your time, but he leaves such a legacy in Colorado, and you have been an adept actor within Colorado politics. Certainly, you've run into his legacy. Your thoughts on his passing?
Well, first, sorry for your loss, Eric, and I think all of Colorado. It's a huge loss today. Two things that really stood out from Governor Lamm when I was looking through interviews and articles and everything else about him. One is what was mentioned: his straightforwardness. Being candid about issues, believing in something, pushing for it, trying to convince other people, fighting for those things. And he said that the most important thing for a politician was trustworthiness, and whether you agree or disagree with that person, can you trust them? And I think that was a big thing for him. Second thing was just how fascinating his career was. You look at it, he was a lawyer, an author, a teacher, a reporter, the list goes on and on. He was working into his 80s. And his political career, he went from the state house to the governor's mansion, ran for U.S. Senate, and then ran for president on the Reform Party. He was, far to the left on environmental issues and fought with Democrats on immigration, and it was very an array of positions that he had. But I think there's no doubt he'll be remembered for opposing the 1976 Olympics. I'm somebody who loves a good ballot fight, but looking at that, it's a whole nother level of bold to take on the Olympics, and he was successful. It reminded me of Governor Hickenlooper taking on the Mile High Stadium name thing and kind of catapulting his political career. So I think Governor Lamm was certainly somebody who had a huge impact on Colorado and will certainly be missed.
Rounding out the panel with us today, Marion Goodland, Chief State House reporter for Colorado Politics. Marion, you're also someone who had a chance to work directly with Governor Lamm. So tell us a little about your experience and your thoughts with how you cover politics. You've seen the legacy bear its fruit, and also how different it is from the career from Governor Lamm. What are some of the things that stick out to you today?
First of all, I did work with Governor Lamm back in the mid-'90s when he was director of the Center for Public Policy and Contemporary Issues at the University of Denver. I was in the Media Relations Department and was assigned to work with him and Hank Brown. What a pair. I'll tell you, you just didn't ever see two politicians who had such divergent opinions but weren't afraid to challenge each other on those things and work together extremely well in doing so. I also set up his 1996 presidential announcement, which was kind of an odd assignment. Traveled to Washington, D.C. with him for some work that he was doing with Alan Simpson on Social Security reform. This was a guy, as Patty and Erica both said, straight talk. He was not afraid to express his opinions, and if they didn't sit well with the Democratic Party, oh well. You aren't going to see politicians like that in this day and age when you look at how things have changed so much over the last 25 years, which is when I worked with him. I don't see either Hank Brown or Dick Lamm ever being in this day and age, ever getting elected. That just wouldn't happen. Politicians can't afford to have that level of honesty.
You hear often when people pass away, and we shall never see the likes of him or her again. In this case, we will certainly be hard-pressed to ever see someone from the likes of Richard Lamm again. We move on. On Tuesday, the CDC recommended counties with a significant amount of coronavirus cases reissue the use of masks in indoor spaces, even for those who are vaccinated. According to the number of cases in Colorado, that would mean around 42 Colorado counties would be masking up once again. The state has not issued an official response to the recommendations, leaving the authority at this point to decide what to do to the counties that would be impacted. Eric, we begin with you on this one. It feels like the second verse is going to be a little bit different than the first verse on this one, especially since the counties right now are in charge. Do you think that's going to be something the counties really want?
Yeah, on the one hand, yes, the second verse is going to be different than the first verse. Although on the other hand, my reaction, Dominic, when you were doing the question was that I've seen this play before and I didn't enjoy it all that much the first time around. But yes, if this is not going to have the same kind of leadership and executive orders coming out of the governor's office, if counties are going to be going it alone, it will be a different play and a problematic play, and obviously all the opportunity for different counties to go in different directions depending on whether they're a blue-dominated county or a red-dominated county. Just to tease my column that will run this weekend in Colorado Politics, next week in the Denver Gazette, I take on this issue, but really the issue of vaccines. And I think it is time, as we've seen over the last week or two, public opinion has really shifted and shifted hard in the direction of those who refuse to be vaccinated. They have a right not to get vaccinated, but they ought to pay the price of that, of exercising that right. And whether that price is in terms of employment or in terms of not being able to go to a sports arena or a concert hall or a grocery store to pick up their grocery, it is time for those who are refusing to be part of the community effort at vaccination to bear a bigger share of the burden if we're going back into another cycle of this.
Michael, we come to you next on this one. We've learned, at least so far, that neither extreme in handling more cases is going to work. We shouldn't lock down forever. That's too crushing for an economy. We shouldn't pretend it's not there. That has not boded well for people. There's something to be said about the middle. I just have no idea if the counties can get there. How do you think reaction so far to these new guidelines will be?
Yeah, well, I think it was a kind of a surprise to start with, given how quickly this came out. We knew that there was an uptick in cases, but then the CDC comes out with this, and I think counties were kind of like, wait, what are we going to do now? I know, at least on the school side, they had just put out, we're in Dougco. Our kids, got the email and saying it's up to parents if you want to wear masks or not, and now that might change. I think you're really going to see a difference county by county with this going on. But I think, you look at the goalposts, I think, have been moved several times throughout this. First it was, let's make sure hospitals aren't overrun. Then we were, herd immunity 70%, then it's 85%. You look at vaccines, we're supposed to help us get life back to normal. Now we're back to masks. And so I think there's a lot of uncertainty. Look, this is a pandemic. Things change. The data is constantly coming out. The Delta variant is causing, a lot of issues around. But I think there's two positive things right now. One is that Colorado has seen an uptick in cases, but it's not a huge spike yet. So we're hoping that doesn't continue on. And in the UK, the Delta variant came through pretty hard, and now it's back down, and hoping that quickly happens here. But I think there's one thing that's clear, and that's that the severity of COVID, regardless of the variant or not, is less if you get the vaccine. You can still get it, hopefully people don't, but I think the key right now is getting as many people vaccinated as possible.
Marianne, so far the state is not taking action, we haven't heard any executive orders, emergency orders from the governor. Do you think that's off the table?
No, I don't. It kind of depends on just how far this thing goes. We already know that we have problems in Mesa County where the variant is causing problems for the hospitals there. The governor just lifted his emergency declaration a couple of weeks ago. So obviously, if he decides to go back and start cranking down a little bit on things, that means that emergency declaration will have to come back. It's politically risky for him to do that, However, it just depends on how far this thing goes. The good news, I think, is that the state's latest effort to get people vaccinated, which is to give out these $100 Walmart gift cards, has been relatively successful. They are reporting upticks in vaccinations in a variety of places, particularly in communities of color, which has been one of the reluctant groups to get those vaccinations. So that is the good side of it, and maybe that will be enough.
You know, coincidentally, that same week, we also offered PBS 12 mugs as an incentive. So it could be the Walmart gift cards, it could be the mugs. It's kind of a coin flip at this point. Patty, counties making these decisions, you have county health departments, you have counties who participate in multiple county health departments, and then you have county commissioners who want to say, get out or get in, or now it's our decision. It can get a little messy at the county level. Is that going to be something that we continue to talk about?
Of course, it's going to get messy. It's already messy at the county level. When Polis pulled back the state of emergency in the middle of May, it already went to the counties, and very few issued mandates, like masking mandates or anything like that. Some, like Jefferson County yesterday, said strongly urged wearing masks inside, but no county in Colorado yet has gone to flat-out orders of that. But that could happen depending on how things go. When the CDC came out with its kind of surprise, this is going to have to happen, they were getting new information about the breakthrough variant, which is people who'd had COVID, who'd been vaccinated, who caught beta, didn't know, but they were able to definitely infect others. They were in okay health themselves, but that the beta variant is so much more infectious than the previous variant. So that seems to be one of the issues here. We're not just dealing with the counties, we're dealing with the school districts. DPS says they're going to come up with something soon. Denver has said they're considering what they're going to say. State is still holding back. They're going to let the counties decide. But depending on how bad this gets, we just had the outbreak over the All-Star game, depending on how bad it gets, we could certainly see more rigid guidelines coming.
Monday morning, Denver Mayor Michael Hancock shared the State of the City address and Denver's proposed solutions to issues like coronavirus and homelessness. The major headline from the address was Hancock's proposed $450 million bond proposal that would include the building of a new arena, an idea that is receiving mixed responses from City Council. As a veteran now of many ballot proposals, in Denver, $450 million sounds like a lot of money, but hey, Denverites have said yes to quite a bit in the past. Do you think they might continue the generosity?
Well, I think if it gets on the ballot, that would certainly be the case. Typically, the tax increases, bond increases pass on the Denver ballot. But I think the harder part is getting it through City Council. You look at, it was less than 24 hours after this comes out. John Frank with Axios has this story about how City Council members were upset, basically on how it was done and the fact that, is a stadium really needed? Is it the kind of jobs that they really want? It's one of these cases where it seems like, there's different priorities, and you see this a lot on city councils or even at the state legislature. The governor or mayor comes out with something, and the legislature or city council is like, we wanted to spend this money differently, we wanted to do different stuff. And so you have to question how much communication or dialogue is really happening before these things are rolled out. And the fact that publicly city council people would go out and say that they oppose this, I think might have something to do with, too, the mailers that were sent out to city council people, putting pressure on them, criticizing them for not supporting this. And I don't think that helps get those votes in line. So it's really interesting. Obviously, Mayor Hancock has 2 years left. This is one of these legacy things, and we'll see what happens with it. But these battles are always entertaining to watch.
Mary Ann, there's a big bond proposal like this. The arena is just a part of it, but it seems to be a big part of it. So where do you think this is going to go, and how likely Mayor Hancock is to get this not only to the voters but through council?
I think it's going to be a harder press through council than he would to get it through the voters. It's interesting to me that if this is a replacement for the Coliseum, and that's not clear at this point. The Coliseum has seen better days, maybe not a bad idea, but you have to look at the other pressing issues in Denver right now, particularly around homelessness, particularly around affordable housing. And given that he wants to build a new arena at the same time that you have neighborhoods like Globeville, Elyria, and Swansea really struggling with the other things that are going on in that area, is that a good idea, or is it just another slap in the face to those neighborhoods?
Patty, did the idea of a new arena in Denver to at this kind of capacity really come from the need from the Westward Christmas party?
Yes, because it's quite a big party, and we'll all be wearing masks this year. You know, with the National Western Complex, they've always talked about the possibility something will someday replace the Coliseum, although it's not remotely clear that this is the replacement for that. They've talked about wanting to redo that great little 1909 arena where the rodeo was originally held, and that kind of got thrown back with some of the, you know, the tourism funding that was supposed to help pay for that, and a private partnership. Those kind of fell through, so some of that would go to helping that arena, but that is not the 10,000 seat arena. I don't think city council members, and especially those who represent this area where they're going to build it, are the only ones fighting this. I think a lot of people around the city are going to say, why do we need another arena? Unless John Elway goes and the Fray promised several free concerts, what is it going to do for them? I think a lot of people are wondering, why are we paying $160 million, and that's not all, to build this arena, when we are looking at the streets, which are a mess? I mean, if you try to drive around town right now, you're always encountering street work. When they're still trying to decide what to do with the homeless, even though that is a very controversial position too. But the last thing I've noticed people clamoring for in Denver, Colorado is another arena.
I mean, Eric, to be fair, even monster truck rallies deserve an updated venue. What are your thoughts on the $450 million proposal from Mayor Hancock?
Monster truck rallies and all-star wrestling as well. I think your question, Dominic, originally talked about a mixed reaction. I think mixed is probably a charitable description of the reaction we've seen. One of my rules of politics is first, before you roll out a proposal, you make the case for the need. And I just don't think Michael Hancock and his allies have made any case or any groundwork as to why this is necessary. I identify with a lot of what Michael, Marianne, and Patty have said here. I don't want to just repeat. Let me just throw one other angle into the equation. This city right now and the state are veritably awash in money. It's stimulus money, it's tax revenue, just because the economy is going at a very fast clip at the moment. When we're awash in money, is that really the time when we need to or are well advised to go out and borrow money? I do think if it gets to the voters, it is likely to pass, Denver voters being Denver voters. But I think there's some hard conversations and questions and deliberations ahead at the council level.
Well, it's time for a very favorite part of the show, Disgrace of the Week. As always, Ms. Calhoun, please start us off.
Well, for our disgrace, we're going to return to Aurora, where the pistol whipping arrest of a man suspected of trespassing, you know, he wasn't carrying an Uzi, he was suspected of trespassing, was videotaped. It was incredibly violent, incredibly over the top by an officer who has since resigned, has since been charged, but we are discovering should never have been on the force in the first place. A second officer who was there and didn't report it has also been charged. But we have to give credit to the Aurora Police Department for, in this case, unlike, say, the Elijah McClain case, Police Chief Vanessa Wilson, who has gone forward and said this was horrible. These, you know, why she sent out why the arrest warrants for the two officers involved. This was really incredible in a city where you would think by now the officers would know better.
Eric, we will go to you next for our Disgrace of the Week.
I'm going to go back to the last question we did, Dominic, about the mayor's State of the City speech and particularly his bond proposals. It just strikes me, just to continue very briefly, that this one was not ready for prime time. I think Michael nailed it on the head, that this is a legacy project. It is somewhat a vanity project for Michael Hancock. Who knows? Maybe the mayor's name is going on the new arena if that were to come to pass. But this one was not well thought through. The groundwork was not laid. As I said, it is not ready for prime time. And man, these lame duck years for Michael Hancock were down into, you know, counting down 2 years. It's going to be a long number of months.
Michael, your Disgrace of the Week.
First, I want to second what Patty said about the Aurora police officer, but mine is about one. There's good news that we are expected to get $2 to $3 billion in TABOR refunds over the next 3 years. The bad news is that the Democrats in the legislature are already scheming ways to keep that money from going back to us. So more is never enough, even when government's flush with money.
Marianne.
To all of those folks who have been blasting world champion gymnast Simone Biles for pulling out of the individual and all-around competitions, Simone did, and she has said that she is having some mental health issues and some confidence issues, and her pulling herself out made it possible for another American to take the gold in the individual all around. That's the definition of unselfish, and something her critics are completely clueless about.
And the first among medalists to happen with Miss Lee. Let's get into saying something nice, the hardest part of the show. Patty.
A lot of nice things this week. When you talk about Colorado's cultural history, people are beginning to recognize that's as important, say, as architecture. So you have Campamachi down in southeastern Colorado, which the House the bill is moving through the Congress to make that a national site. You have La Alma Lincoln Park in Denver. On Monday night, Denver City Council will discuss making that the second cultural historic district in Denver. The first is where we are right now in 5 points. And next week, Historic Denver is coming out with a list of 50 other places they're looking at to preserve or at least take action on and celebrate as this city grows and changes.
Eric, we go to you for your Say Something Nice.
To no surprise, I'm going to go back to the passing of Dick Lamm, but with a different angle. Dick was one half of a very powerful, formidable, dynamic duo. The other half of that duo was his wife, Dottie Lamm, who once wrote a book entitled Second Banana about her role as a political spouse. But Dottie has been anything other than a second banana. She has been just a dynamic leader in the state. She has now lost her lifelong partner. She is a widow here. She's had her own health struggles over the last year or two. Fortunately, nothing that serious. But I think we all extend our sympathy to Dottie as well as to her kids and grandkids on just such a major loss.
Michael.
I wanted to say something nice about another politician that passed away this week from a neighboring state. U.S. Senator Mike Enzi passed away, and I interned for him years ago. He was just a great person. He was a staunch conservative, but friendly to everyone, and successfully worked across the aisle many times.
Miriam.
I say this with a very heavy heart. Congratulations to my boss and editor, Linda Shapley, who has been named the publisher of Colorado Community Media. They are getting a phenomenal journalist, but she is going to be dearly, dearly missed by all of us at Colorado Politics and everyone in the Clarity Media family.
You're here. A huge win for CCM. Tough loss for you guys. I totally understand that. For everybody here at Colorado Inside Out and PBS 12, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.